Good afternoon, it's Gary Sly and it's the Legacy of Handmade Objects. I'm here in the shop on Monday afternoon, June the 3rd. I'm glistening a little bit today. It's hot outside. I've been trooping all around today. I've been up at Jacksonville working on an event for the Embroidery Guild of America, and then I'm back here in Leesburg for the afternoon. A little bit later I'm going to a reception where we're getting some work done and some volunteers for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. So all kinds of fun things going on, even though it's hot here in Florida. I like to always kind of keep you up to date with what's going on here in the shop and what I'm working on in terms of various projects. So today I want to spend some time talking about Crewel embroidery. Many of you perhaps remember when Crewel embroidery was quite popular. Perhaps some of you learned to enjoy it. When I first started stitching, it was mainly what was available in the 70s. There were lots of kits, fairly inexpensive at the time, that you could work on. Of course, Crewel embroidery is mostly distinguished by the fact that you use mostly wool. You can also use cotton and silk threads, but it's not quite as detailed as some of the other embroidery styles that you'll see. It actually has a rich history. Crewel embroidery of some type goes way back in early European history, at least 500 or 600 years. Traveling salesmen would write or draw on fabric and go around from town to town and sell those fabrics. And then women would gather up whatever fibers they could find and stitch those and create pictures. And of course, Berlin embroidery was quite popular during the Victorian period, as I understand it. I can't say that I'm an expert on all that history, but I certainly have read about it generally. Well, I did a couple of really fun projects way back before I discovered cross stitch. So I would say I was probably doing mostly Crewel in the late 70s, maybe up till about 84, 85, something like that. If you were around back then, you know that when counted cross stitch hit the waves, it really burst onto the scene, and a lot of people got excited about that. And today it's progressively harder and harder to find Crewel kits. It is still a craft that someone could easily do, because all you really need is a piece of fabric with some designs on it. And so while I have some older kits and some newer kits here in the shop, I also find folks will sometimes just decide they want to do a particular image, draw it on a piece of fabric, and go from there. I still remember one of the projects I did early on is I took a coloring book, and I really loved Tigger, the Winnie the Pooh character, and so I traced Tigger onto, it was actually a piece of terry cloth. It was an old towel, and then I Crewel embroidered it using bright orange and black and other colors of wool, and gave it to a friend's new baby. So I remember Crewel as being something that you could use some of your creative talents with. It's not quite as regimented as counted cross stitch. Now, I've fallen into a project that I'm going to be working on here, and I'll show you that in a minute, but I'll show you one of my older pieces from back in the 80s. I actually put my initials on this piece, and I dated it, so I know that I did this, or I finished this in August of 85. I know this was a kit. I believe it was a Dimensions kit. I can't say for sure. But I know that it was entitled Peaceable Kingdom. And I still have this here, and I have it hanging in the shop because it hung in the bedroom of my youngest son's room when he was growing up. And my pledge to the kids is that the things that were on their walls that I had stitched when they were little and that they saw as they were growing up would become theirs once they established their own household. This hung in my youngest son's bedroom, Graham, but he's not in a place where he has room for it yet, so it's been hanging here in the shop. But it's a wonderful piece that I love doing and still remember having from back in the day. I also posted at the beginning another photo of one of Iris's that I did and finished up for some friends in the Lynchburg area in Evington back when I was in the parish. I did a number of other Crewel pieces in the 80s and the 90s, but I mostly gave those away, and it's a little harder sometimes to track down those and get pictures of them. I remember doing the Norman Rockwell piece of a grandfather and his grandson fishing, and that was a lot of fun. Well, tell you the story of how I got back into working on some Crewel at this point. Got a phone call kind of out of the blue from a little lady in Alabama. Turns out she's in a nursing home in Alabama. Not real sure how she got a hold of my name and number, but she called me and said that there was a Crewel picture that she had done when she was a young woman, and it had all sorts of wonderful meaning for her. But the original that she did had been lost, and she couldn't recreate that, but she found a kit. She found another kit that would allow someone to recreate this wonderful Crewel piece. And I'll just kind of show you, I'll give you a still picture of this too if you want to study it. It is an outdoor scene. It's got a raccoon in the middle, it's got a chipmunk, a rabbit, a grouse, a duck, and all the kind of animals and plants that go around that kind of scene on the edge of a lake or a river. The kit was made in 1979 by Columbia Minerva Company. Various places I see the Hallmark cards insignia, so they must have had something to do with the copyright and the pictures and that sort of things. So you usually got a color picture of the finished product, which would help you to kind of eyeball it and take a look and see what was going on. You'd get a piece of canvas that would already have all of the markings on it, and then you would take your needle and your wools and your cottons, and according to the pattern that you're given, you would fill in. Now you can see I just barely got started with this. So in my hoop there, I've done a tiny bit of the water down at the edge, but I'm going to be working on this over the next few months. If you follow any of my other media, you can look on and see the progress as I go along. They also would give you a pretty detailed pattern with a number to tell you what colors of yarn to use in the various areas. And they would also give you dotted lines so that you would know what direction to put your stitches as you were working on it, so that it would look more realistic. It's a kind of a paint by number approach to stitching. And then all the yarns are of course bundled so that you can sort them and figure out what colors you need. This is quite a big project, as you can see. So there's 6 bundles of yarn here. Wonderful colors. One thing I've noticed about yarns is that they do seem to hold up pretty well. This kit was made in 1979, so these yarns have been in a package ready for somebody to use them for quite a long time. Let's see, what's my math like? Over 40 years, this kit. And when I opened it, the yarns were actually still in pretty good shape. Oh, I just found a needle here. One thing I did notice though, and I don't know if you can see it in the pictures, is that the linen is so old that it does have some age spots on it. And I mentioned that to the lady who asked me to stitch it. She said, never mind, I want it that badly. We'll just go on and stitch it, and then we'll decide what to do about those age spots. It's not something that I can wash, even though the design is not washable and won't wash out. I know that it wouldn't be as easy to stitch on if I washed it. So we'll figure that out when we get there. One thought I had is that we might just stain the background rather than trying to spot clean it and try to get rid of all those age spots. I can tell you from my own bald head here, age spots are not easy to get rid of. So my guess is that what I'll do is just kind of keep on working on it, and we'll see what needs to be done when we get there. And I'm going to frame it for her at some point. Don't know how long this is going to take. Crewel actually moves along pretty quickly. So I'm guessing maybe by the end of the year I'll be in pretty good shape here, but I could be wrong. If things get busy and I don't have a lot of time to work on it, it may be into 2025 before I finish the piece. Something else I thought was interesting, it's almost a window back, looking back to look at these instructions, because there are things that we know now about stitching and about the framing process in particular that they did not have access to back then. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I was reading the section where they talk about how to finish your work. I've done a whole episode on framing, and I've tried to give you some hints and some ideas about how to do framing or how to make sure your framing is effective. Of course, one of the things they tell you, which I'm not doing, is to take your hoop off every time you finish and lay down your piece and put the hoop back on when you start stitching again. I'm too lazy to do that. And you know from last week's episode, I don't like hoops much. But when you're doing crewel embroidery, you really do need a tight, taut surface. You can't depend upon your own ability to maintain tension. So you have to use a hoop or a frame, and I can't imagine that a frame would be as useful for something like this as a hoop. But you know, I'll work on getting rid of those images from the hoop. But they obviously, when they were putting this kit together back in the 70s, were assuming that a lot of people would just kind of frame it themselves, do it at home. And they've done some things, or they've suggested some things here that I see people doing today that today are no-nos. They suggest the size of a picture frame, and then they say center the design on a piece of stiff cardboard. Now, right off the bat, I'll tell you, don't mount anything with fiber or fabric on cardboard. The only thing you should mount your pieces on today are acid-free products. That cardboard is made in such a way that it breaks down the pulp of trees, as you probably know, and it is full of acid. And those cardboard pieces will eventually leach into your material and actually deteriorate not only the linen, but the wools and everything else associated with it. So I was kind of shocked to see that they were pretty cavalier about it and just suggested that you use cardboard. They obviously didn't know and didn't have a good sense of the chemical issues that were related to it at the time. The other thing they say is to use tape, masking tape, around the edge of your fabric to keep it from fraying. Again, that's something we've learned in the ensuing years, that tape is also generally full of acid. You can buy acid-free tape, and you can use that around the edges of your linen or whatever fabric you're using, and it won't harm it. But if you're using duct tape, masking tape, any of those kind of things, you run the risk not only of it ruining the area where the tape adheres, but also of it leaching into the fabric and creeping into the design itself. Whenever somebody comes in the shop these days and they have tape around the edge of their work and they want it framed, I immediately cut that part off, but I do urge them not to do that afterwards. If you're wanting to work on a piece and you're afraid the edges are going to fray, consider serging it, sewing it, anything that doesn't involve something with acid that'll eat away at the product. Because, you know, the whole point, I think, of creating these things, especially when you put months and months in a project, is that it will last, and that it will last beyond your lifetime and hopefully a few generations after that. And so you want to do everything you can to preserve it at the time you're working on it. Obviously, try not to get your hands all over the front of it if you can help it. Try to use things that will cover the edges of the frame, because the oils from your hands will also adhere to the fabric and through the years will create problems. I framed this Peaceable Kingdom without glass also, because back then I couldn't afford much more than the basics. I know I had it custom framed, but I couldn't afford glass. Today, I would always recommend glass. If you're worried about a piece like Crewel bumping up next to the glass, ask your framer to put spacers around or do something with your mats or something so that you don't have to worry about that. But glass, of course, is another way to protect your framing. I like glass that protects, but I don't necessarily like the non-glare glass. And again, I've talked about some of these framing issues in other places. So I'm busy doing some Crewel work this time of the year. Summer is pretty slow here in Leesburg. We don't get as much foot traffic. Sometimes here in Florida, summer's a hard time for small businesses. So I just want to put a little plug in there. If you do happen to be out tromping around and you can stand the heat, wherever you live and wherever the small businesses are that you like to frequent, go in and give them a little love this time of year. I know sometimes for us in the summer, it's a little harder to make expenses. You want to try to look ahead and you want to try to be prepared for summer, but no matter what you do, it's still helpful to have the support of our customers. And so I'm not necessarily begging you to come in here. I know many of you are not nearby, but if you have local needlework shops and you want to see them continue, make sure that you go and visit them every so often and give them a little love, because it is that regular patronage and the regular support of our customers that makes these little shops possible. So I'm having a great time here. I'll be posting some updates on Instagram and Facebook as I work on this Crewel piece. I hope summer is bursting onto the scene for you in some way that is nice. I hope if you're going to travel that's a safe thing to do, and enjoy some iced tea and some watermelon and some of the fun things that summer has to offer. As always, this is Gary Sly. Thanks for joining me. This is the legacy of Handmade.